So Rob is the Chief Engagement Officer at WorkTango and has spent the last 18 years consulting companies on employee engagement, while building HR, technology, and advisory companies. He's the Canadian chairperson for the Entrepreneurs Engagement Alliance, with a mandate to lead and help educate corporate, government, and not-for-profit management on the formal process for implementing engagement across the enterprise community. He's active in the Engage for Success movement, focused on raising the profile of the impact of employee engagement on employee and business success, and he was named one of the top 100 global employee engagement influencers in 2020. Sorry about that, Rob, and thanks again for speaking.
No worries. Thanks so much, Alex. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Excited to be here to talk about this topic of maintaining employee engagement in uncertain times. And who would have thought we'd be a year into this, right? Things have changed dramatically. I've done way less travel and playing sports and shaving than I ever have done in the past. But I have done a lot more TV binge watching and Zoom meetings than I've ever wanted to. It's what we play the cards we're dealt. And this is an important topic, I think, now more than ever, especially for a lot of us, right? We're trying to engage our employees, our teams in an environment that's new, that has been coming with a lot of uncertainty. Really excited to talk about the topic today. Thanks for the TorontoJobs.ca for putting this together to help us educate and entertain and inspire one another. But a little bit about me. I know there was an introduction done there, but I co-founded a company a while ago called WorkTango, which does just that, helps companies measure engagement. And I work with a couple of events that I've started in terms of bringing this community together, similar than today, and even a couple of other things around the world of engagement. So I'm super passionate about this and spent 18 years focused on this type of work. So my goal is to really share a wisdom of crowds approach of all the things I've learned, shared, and experienced into the conversation short one we have today. And I love Bitmojis, but I didn't know until recently you could build your own. So I don't know, I'm so excited. You can actually put your own words and your own images. So that's kind of how I think a lot of people are feeling right now. So in terms of how people are feeling right now, I think this screen illustrates the best of what a lot of people are feeling. This wave of uncertainty, I call it, right? Whether it's uncertainty in the office, the pandemic, personal issues. And let's be honest, it was like that last March, right? And it's this April, it's pretty much compounding. There's a lot of uncertainty out there about when we'll be back to work, or vaccines, or stress around changing work lifestyles. What's interesting is when you hear the media and a lot of conversations out there, a lot of this uncertainty and impact of this uncertainty is seen in, when it comes to markets, when it comes to companies out there. But what I really want to talk about today is, well, what about employees, right? And by the way, when you Google employees, this picture comes up. I don't know about you, but this is exactly how my team looks, right? I'm sure yours looks like as well. Kind of funny that this pops up for Google, but I don't want to talk about the market impacts and company impacts. I want to talk about where it all starts, right, in terms of employees. Now, a story I like to tell on this level is that at WorkTango, what we do is we help measure engagement and understand sentiment of employees for companies globally. But we also do it internally as well. We drink our own champagne, so to speak. And every week we check in to find out how people feel about work. And before the pandemic started, those three bar charts there, 100% of employees at our organization felt positive insights in terms of how they felt about work. When March 12th showed up last year, the first time we started seeing a lot of negative. And I'll be honest, this has continued. A year later, there's still uncertainty. There's still negativity around not only the organization potentially, but what's happening in their personal lives. And again, this is just WorkTango, right? This scares me as a business leader of the organization, but it isn't just WorkTango, right? When I look at all of the organizations that we measure engagement on, or sentiment of employees in a year, right? Not only the Q1 last year versus Q1 this year, we're seeing engagement levels down 22%, right? And again, we're seeing communication scores down 34%, company outlook down, right? Things are changing dramatically in our organizations. And I always like to say that, it may seem like this place, but by the way, does anyone know what this place is called? I'm not sure what's on the chat right now, but if you're binge watching Netflix like me, you probably have seen this episode of Stranger Things. But it's this world in Stranger Things called the Upside Down. It's this alternate universe. And all the things I'm talking about, this isn't an alternate universe, right? This is real. This is kind of the way workplace has been, where we're challenged with engaging our employees in uncertain times, and challenged with that level of, keeping people, inspired at work. And the reality is, it's not going to change much, right? Not today. I think you're all going to be attentive as part of this conversation. But the reality is, in the immediate future, this is going to be our world, right? Remote work, the uncertainty that comes with it. And I don't know about you, but I'm not sending my team into the offices anytime soon. And we look a lot of data out there, and this is a really interesting research from Gartner that showed at the top, 90% of companies, when they think about vaccines, even post-vaccine, are going to be considering, well, should we allow employees to work remotely at least part of the time? So I give that kind of prelude to the conversation to really focus on what we're going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about. And today, the focus will be the impact of uncertainty in the workplace, why it matters, right? 4 approaches to maintain employee engagement in these uncertain times. And then also 4 mindsets to start with, kind of something that you can tangibly do moving forward. And I'll sprinkle in some examples to really inspire action. So where I usually like starting these conversations is with this. Talk about looking for Google images. When you type "who cares," this comes up. There's no better picture to depict who cares than this. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time why engagement's important. This is an HR conference. You probably already know. If you don't and need convincing, again, I could spend an hour talking about all the different metrics, not just HR metrics like retention, but other business critical KPIs, profitability, sales, retention. Again, engagement matters in organizations. That one corporation that I work with called Engage for Success, that's all it is meant to do, is build evidence around employee engagement based out of the UK. Now, again, if your eyes glaze over numbers, I think the next picture describes what engagement isn't. So if you aren't impressed by these numbers, at the end of the day, this is what we don't want our employees doing. This is what disengaged employees doing. So again, if you're not into numbers, this is a good way to think about it as well. Another reason you should care. So another last reason you should care is that think about engagement in a generic world. That's important. But when it comes to uncertainty and change, we really have to start considering how to engage our employees through this uncertainty. Right? Through change, there's denial, there's resistance, there's people letting go, and engagement levels drop. A lot of our employees are in that space right now. But when it comes to focusing on these types of initiatives I'm going to talk about today, we're trying to get people back to internalizing those changes, back to getting engagement up, and try to flatten the curve. Yes, I use flatten the curve in a different context, through the conversations of engaging our employees through these uncertain times. So that being said, let's get into the main content that I mentioned, first starting with 4 approaches to engage employees in uncertain and, in many cases, remote times. So first thing, there's no such thing as overcommunication, right? When I've worked with organizations on what's been provided impact, where they're seeing engagement levels improve, it's correlated to high communication in an organization. And when there's uncertainty, when there's change, there's a remote environment, you need to bolster communication. And you might have to use different vehicles you've used in the past, or be creative, right? So I want to share a couple of points or considerations on about communication. So a couple of key points. One, honesty and transparency is paramount, right? If transparency or authenticity isn't part of your values today, embrace them and start embracing them now, and exemplify them in every decision you make. And I can't overemphasize how important this is, right? When you look at research out there, and I love the Neuro Leadership Institute, right? Management transparency is the most significant predictor of employee happiness. Right? Leaders are seen as trustworthy, more effective, right? And again, seeing things clearly, right? It boosts employee engagement. It boosts performance. Secrecy erodes trust, right? And it's important to communicate what's happening in an organization. Now, when I talk about communicate what's happening, many companies they'll do the quick video or share the data and the insights. However, that's not enough. It's not just identifying what and communicating what. It's really around communicating the why. So don't stop at what is the second part of this. Maybe your team's losing resources. You can't hit headcount. Well, just sharing that's transparency, but you're not offering them the why, right? And I love the innocence of this child asking why repeatedly. But telling your company, your team what's happening, it doesn't really support levels of uncertainty. You have to add that level of why. And again, giving a good answer to why isn't just this philosophical distraction, right? When you explain why, it has cognitive, real-world functions. It promotes learning, it promotes discovery, right? It's vital to navigate, right? Smoothly navigate through uncertain environments. It adds context to what's happening. So again, don't only bolster your communication, but make sure it's not what, it's why. But also, in this world of remote worlds, create opportunity for remote social interaction, right? Again, this is challenging. But I think one of the most essential steps companies can make is structure ways for employees to interact socially in these times. And when I say interact socially, informal conversations about non-work topics. An easy way to establish some of this is that leave time at the beginning of calls, right, just for non-work items. Right, we're going to spend the next few minutes just catching up with each other. How was the weekend? I've seen companies do these virtual care packages, or we're giving budget to employees to say, what would you do with a wellness budget? Share that with the rest of the employees. Let's talk nothing about work. But while these events sound artificial or forced, what experienced managers and companies are seeing is that it helps reduce feelings of isolation. It promotes a sense of belonging, right? And in terms of building that level of engagement. In virtual care packages, a question just came up. I've seen everything from maybe it's one where you let people select. I find those are the best ones. I've seen virtually things about wellness. During the winter months, it was here's your masks and your teas and your coffees and things like that. I've seen items around, how do you build a better workplace? Maybe it's plans or living things when people, maybe on their own, things to take care of. So there's all different layers of virtual care packages. Now, the last part of communication is establishing rules of engagement is really important in uncertain times. Just think about it, right? The changing work environment breeds uncertainty, and remote work has made it really tough for companies to navigate this. So for example, right, do you have strict working hours, or do you allow your employees to work whenever they want? Right? Establishing the rules of engagement help build engagement at the end of the day, right? Is there a cadence of meetings that you expect people to be on? What communication channels do you use? Is there one communication channel for regular communication? Are there other tools that you use for different purposes, right? Or for troubleshooting, right? Where can employees go when they need help or difficulties? When there's uncertainty on what to do in certain situations, again, that breeds disengagement. So sometimes these rules of engagement really support next steps. So that was the first major component. The second pillar to engaging employees in these uncertain times is building a continuous feedback structure. When I mean structure, feedback and communication is so critical at any time, because we all know, right? Success isn't linear, right? Work isn't sequential. It's always this reality of navigating through it. And you have to ask yourself, do I have with my team or company a way where we can, iterate and have feedback happening throughout the course of time? Again, feedback is a huge proponent of engagement. When I talk about different structure, what is your structured feedback rhythm for your whole company, for teams, for individuals? Remember, they can't just walk up to you anymore or look over their shoulder and ask a question, right? So again, thinking about what is your routine and that level of structure around feedback and conversations. And when you build a structure, magic happens, right? There's alignment more frequently, right? People are aligned and on the same page as opposed to not checking in for another quarter on anything, right? You get to course correct, right? The more frequent you're having these quick discussions, right? You can actually course correct in terms of the direction of employees. That's engaging versus spending 3 months on a project, then checking in on goals and realizing that an employee was going the wrong direction. But also builds accountability, right? It builds accountability for yourselves to address them, right? Then to provide kind of insights on what's happening in their world. And I think when you don't have informal chats, especially around a water cooler, it's really hard to build these three things. So these structures are really important. And I won't get deep into everything that you could do, but again, one-on-one meetings are important, right? I've worked with companies that mandate one-on-one discussions where, again, when you're not doing them, there's huge levels of disengagement. But also remember that there can be bad check-ins, right? When you're having these with your employees or mandating them, check-ins doesn't mean reviewing goals, right? It means really more focused on their needs and support. So again, there's other examples of these types of check-ins, whether it's huddles. Huddles bolster communication, reinforces commitments. It gives a place where you can escalate issues. Every day, our whole organization has a quick meeting, and people can raise a red flag. I have a concern or issue, and people don't leave that virtual meeting until they talk to the parties involved. A really great way, again, to make sure we're supporting people through challenges, and it's easy to recognize and celebrate. So that's just an example. You've all heard of retrospectives. Let's talk about what's worked well, what hasn't. So there's engaging ways you can build into your feedback structure to build better engagement. And again, a lot of these are proven practices. Now that's just one item. The second pillar. The third pillar in terms of how to deal with uncertainty and engage in uncertain times is EQ wins over IQ. would say all the time, and I would say that, but even more important during a crisis. But emotional intelligence is way more important than intelligence when it comes to uncertain times. What we're seeing organizations do is invest a lot of time in emotional training and providing these types of insights to leaders to be able to support these conversations, right? Again, EQ wins over IQ, especially during those times, because look at the world through the lens of your employees. They're lacking face-to-face supervision. They lack access to information. There's social isolation for many of them. There's distractions at home. I don't know what it's like to have to work at home with children. I don't have any. Apparently they get fed a lot and you have to school them at home now. So it's hard for me to even understand, but you have to try and see the world through the employee lens. And that's when focusing on employee emotional intelligence becomes really important. So first, when it comes to this pillar, understand what employees are going through. Right? And again, it's not just listening and understanding, it's really trying to understand with empathy, right? What are they going through? Acknowledge and relate to it, or at least try to, right? And be as genuine as you can. Again, I can't, I don't know what it's like to have children and do all that, but I can try to do my best to empathize. And when I talk about empathy in organizations as an important pillar to engagement, what frustrates me is that when I bring it up, leaders laugh or they roll their eyes. But the reality is this stuff works. Like 93% of employees say they're more likely to stay with an empathetic employer. And that's what we want. We want them engaged. We want them staying in organizations. We need them here to help hit your goals. And again, I always use this concept of Maslow, and we all know Maslow, but there's been some recent changes, Wi-Fi and battery and the pandemic, toilet paper. But the reason why I bring this up as an example is that, think about it. Some of our employees, their base needs aren't being met. The physiological needs in terms of maybe job losses in the organization, the safety and security of maybe their current job. So again, there's elements we need to think about where, we have to be empathetic on what's happening in these employees' experiences. So a couple of other things to focus on emotional intelligence, right? Don't only understand what employees are going through, but double down on gratitude, right? It costs you nothing to recognize employees. It's an intrinsic motivator to, discuss what they're doing well. Every week at our company meetings, we just go ahead and share what are recognized for and why. Another thing is connect on a deeper sense of purpose. Maybe you're rallying around your corporate values or purpose to get out of the crisis or whatever it is. At WorkTango, our buyers are HR people, right? At the end of the day, they had other things to worry about when the pandemic hit, right? So what did we do? We didn't focus on selling. We said our passion statement is to improve work lives, which you see on my shirt here. Let's not sell people anything. Let's educate. Let's create events, communities like this, and that we really rally people around that purpose, which was successful. And lastly, enhance focused engagement to include well-being, right? We need people's physical and mental wellness to be key, bouncing back through uncertainty. So be flexible with their schedules, check in, stay connected, right? That sense of connectedness is really important in terms of focusing on people's emotional intelligence, especially in uncertain times. And the last pillar, leaders are your secret weapon in this whole equation, right? They are so impactful, but I feel bad because leaders, right, they're the face of antiquated practices at the end of the day, right? From an HR perspective, what I find is that we don't enable them with tools, right? We create them into situations, or we put leaders in situations where they don't have the ability to really engage their teams. And what I mean by that is, how are you setting basically foundations for success for your leaders to help engage employees through every time, but especially in uncertain times? And just, there's so many examples of how we can leverage our leaders, but let's face it, right? We can enable them through technology, and we can enable them through process. For example, what are we doing from a performance management perspective, right? Are we having leaders to go in once a year and rate them, their employees, on whether they exceed expectations or not, right? We're not really helping leaders engage employees. I say we should be creating full-time coaches, not part-time evaluators in our organizations. So again, just a simple process like your performance management process has a big influence on how that engages employees. Remember, employees don't love the performance management process. They don't love creating goals once a year and checking in to see if they're still relevant, right? So again, process can really support that. And again, another important process is continuous listening. I mean, I can talk about this all day given the work that I do, but are you giving leaders data and insights on whether employees are engaged once a year? Are you giving it 3 months stale, right? What's happening is companies are getting more specific and actively listening to their employees, right? Speed, frequency, diagnostics, and understanding what's the experiences of employees and handing that to leaders in real time. So again, these are just some examples, but the whole idea is that engagement doesn't sit at the HR level, right? Engagement sits at every single leader in the organization, and we need to include them in this process. So the four real approaches that I shared today and wanted to add color to was over communicate, right? Both ways, continuous feedback, EQ is more important than IQ, and leaders are your secret weapon. So what I wanted to end the last 5 minutes with is just some thoughts around, well, where would you start, right? Where can I start this conversation? So I want to add a couple of quick items and mindsets that might help. First is you need to just trust employees, period. Now, if we had a lot more time today, and maybe if you can't pull it up on your computer or your phone, but get a calculator and multiply how many employees you have in your organization by 35,000. So I'll give you a second, go in, you multiply it out. And the reason why I choose the number 35,000 is that your employees make 35,000 decisions a day. Think about it, if you have 5,000 employees in your organization, there are 190 million decisions made every single day. And who cares if they're not in the office, right? You need to trust them, right? They're going to make decisions every single moment without you involved, and trusting them is a very, very engaging process at the end of the day for employees, right? That culture of trust, that culture of confidence builds engagement. Now I always say that trust is a major component of it. You're either building trust or you're eroding it in your organization. So we need to think about ways that we're trusting our employees. It's embarrassing to me that the monitoring software, like making sure people are at their desks or your cameras have to be on, are part of our processes right now to make sure people are working. I mean, again, they're navigating through uncertainty in their own worlds, let alone work, right? We need to be considerate of that. The second is actions speak louder than words, right? Are you going into the office when the mandate has been not to? Right? You promote what you tolerate. So again, just a consideration and mindset. Actions speak louder than words for you and your executive team at the end of the day. Third, lean on your community, right? We're all trying to figure this out together as HR leaders, right? How do we lean on people that are navigating through this, right? And I always say there's either people in your organization or other groups out there. And I'm not affiliated with the people group, I'm just part of it. But there are so many talented HR leaders that are there sharing what's working, what isn't, and sharing those insights. So again, lean on your community from an HR perspective and chats and discussions like this to help navigate you through. And the fourth is just remember the employees from the beginning. Don't forget that your employee success starts with business success. I always say at the end of the day, right, we are all trying to drive success of your business, shareholder value, customer sat, whatever it is. But all those are outcomes. You don't get those until you get the inputs right, the behaviors of your employees every day, the products they build. And if they're not in an engaged state, back to the data we shared earlier, it's really hard to make sure that you get the right outputs. So I use this slide to share, if you're trying to get investment on how to focus on employees, this service profit chain is really important. You can't get the outputs unless you have the employees really engaged in the first place. So 4 considerations, where to start. Trust, actions speak louder than words, lean on your community from an HR perspective, and think employee first, especially in these tough times. Now, with 2 minutes left, where I wanted to leave you was that remember one last thing. Not everything has changed in all these uncertain times. Whether your employee is sitting at home or in a coffee shop or on the office floor or on the floor like this individual, intrinsic motivators of employees don't change wherever they are. So I always love sharing this quote, right? We all know Isaac Newton, right? If I've seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. So if you're thinking about what other companies have done and stand on the shoulder of giants and learn from others, what I've done for you is, I've taken all the research out there, what makes great leaders and engagement in great leaders and what engages employees. Different studies out there, there's about 15 of them, pulled them all together, came up with the themes. And at the end of the day, these are what great companies and great leaders do. They support career development, they care, they set expectations and build accountability, they acknowledge and they appreciate, and they listen, communicate, and offer feedback. So even though all the items I shared today around, well, how do you bolster engagement during uncertain times, those are important. But we can't lose sight that these are the things that drive engagement at the end of the day. Like sitting your team in the room and saying, are we doing these things well in the organization? Where are we Do your own performance management. Where are we, a 1, 2, or 3 on this one? And then identify how to support some of the new initiatives to improve engagement at the end of the day. So in closing, kind of final thoughts, right? Engaging your employees is important, again, in general, but during uncertain times more than ever, as we discussed. Second, these are defining moments for you as a company or HR leader or leader. Like how you treat employees now or how you succeed in this environment, right? Again, defining moments for your organization or you personally as a professional. And also, this isn't going away. Right? We need to think long term. Our workplaces may never be the same. We might have to navigate through that at the end of the day. So that being said, that's what I wanted to share today. I'm happy to stick around for questions, discussion, any of that. And again, that's my contact information if you want to connect. Any questions, thoughts? Happy to look at the chat here, but hopefully that was I know it's hard to get through a lot in 25 minutes, but hopefully that was well. Provides you some good takeaways in terms of your teams or companies as well. All right, well, not seeing any questions. Just give it another moment, but I really appreciate everyone's time today and joining.
Hi, Rob. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, great. I can finally hear you now. Perfect. So I just wanted to come on and say thanks for your presentation. Sorry again about the issues earlier with my side of things. I think it was my audio. I'm not sure. Had you mentioned, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, so I mean, my email address is there, my Twitter handle's there. LinkedIn is probably the easiest in terms of messages, but happy to reach out and chat with someone about any of these concepts.
Okay, great. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in chat here. I do see a question here from Tushar. I'm not sure if you had gotten to that earlier or not.
It was earlier on. I kind of addressed a couple of ideas on virtual care packages. So
okay, great.
Good on that one.
So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to put them here. I don't see anything at the moment, so I just wanted to say thanks again for presenting, and sorry again about the audio issues earlier.
No worries, Alex. I hope you and everyone here has a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, everyone.